Today, I have renowned fine art portrait photographer and business educator Tim Walden from Lexington, Kentucky. Tim and Bev Walden are self-confessed Apple junkies and the proud owners of Walden's Photography, a second-generation photography studio started by Tim's father, Bob Walden. Stepping outside the boundaries that are normally thought of when you hear the word photography, Tim and Bev have each developed their own art forms that are simply amazing. For Tim, it's museum-level, fine art, black and white imagery that captures his imagination, and it's where he honed his skills and continues to do so at every turn. With a background in art and her love of color and form, Bev's signature product is mixed media painting. The paintings she does are called beau visage, meaning beautiful face. With great attention paid to every detail, each of their images is hand-printed to archival standards, hand-signed, and comes with a certificate of authenticity. This is fine art portraiture at its highest level. As Kodak mentors and members of one of the most elite international photography societies, the Society of 25, both Tim and Bev continue to offer the highest level of artistry and service. So welcome, Tim. I am so thrilled to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, and I too am thrilled. Anytime I can share with colleagues and others in this industry and just talk with friends like you, I'm happy.
Well, it's great to have you here. And today's topic is about Tim's amazing black and white portrait photography and how Walden's Photography has become such a big and well-known brand in Lexington, Kentucky and beyond. So you've been involved in photography from a young age. What was that first spark that ignited your passion for becoming a professional photographer?
Well, I think it was the smell of fixer in the darkroom. I think something happened to my brain about that time, and I was hooked. But for me, it was my father. You mentioned my father, and he was a very passionate and skilled mentor for me. And he was handicapped from his armpits down. He'd had an accident as a commercial photographer, went into portrait business. But for me, what drove me, Nigel, to photography really wasn't, and I tell everyone this because it's so true in our industry, it wasn't his talent, although he was amazingly talented. It was his passion. And I thought to myself, how can you love something so much? I mean, he had so many physical problems. He had so many other issues, but he just loved life, and photography was part of that reason. And so I thought, if you love something that much, it's kind of worthy of me at least checking it out. And so I mentored under him, listened to what he said, got his wisdom in those darkroom hours that he printed fine art, and the bug bit me. So that's really where it all came from for me.
That's an amazing story. These days, it's hard to get any sons to listen to their fathers about anything, it seems. He must have been even more amazing just because of that.
Yeah, well, he didn't ask me, so I think if he'd have told me to do this, I probably wouldn't have. I was typical that way.
Well, I'm really glad that you did. What does the term professional photographer really mean for you? It's like a label that people attach to themselves. It has the danger of being somewhat overused. What does that really mean for you?
Well, for me, it means a high level of skill, experience, artistry, all experience in creating these pieces. It means all of those things. And you're right, it has been diluted a bit. And I'm a bit saddened by that because there's no barrier to entry in our industry. Now, I'm one that wants anybody and everybody that truly wants to be a photographer to jump in. But we need education. And I think to be professional, not so much on the technical side, which is just simply a camera and a customer, but professional on the true business side means that you get an education, you back it up with some experience and artistry, and people can trust when they come to you that they're getting the finest in photographic portraiture.
Yeah, I agree. It has become somewhat diluted, and it is a shame that the professional aspect of it is becoming scarcer. That does upset me to some degree.
Me too. And I will add this. I think one of the greatest things you can learn is what you don't know. And I think people need to know what they don't know. And that's a bit of the problem. I think if we face, as we should, if you're going to any type of education, I don't yet know this, but I'm going to roll up my sleeves and learn it. You're going to be a true professional at the highest level. But I think it's that unfortunate side that says, wow, I've got it, and there's not been anything substance under that, is where that not knowing what you don't know can hurt you and the people you're serving.
Yeah, and you're likely to fall into unseen potholes as a result as well.
Yes, sir.
So, fine art, too. This is another term that I think we probably should take a moment to define. It's a very subjective term and it's open to a lot of interpretation. What does fine art mean to you, and what do you feel separates a piece of fine art photography from the rest?
Well, for me, fine art, there's certain measurements that you can attach to fine art. I mean, and without being sarcastic, it needs to be fine in every sense of the word. It needs to be art. I mean, it does have to have that undergirding of absolute excellence. But fine art for me in black and white truly means that you have a grasp on the skill set it takes to produce a beautiful piece. And when you do produce it, you're producing it on materials that are archivally sound. You're framing and matting it in a conservation manner, and you're getting the most on the technical side out of that art form. And hopefully, you've got the artistic side, and you marry that together, and that truly is fine art. I was raised hand printing in the darkroom, silver gelatin prints, archivally sound pieces. And so for me, that had to remain when the digital era came for it to be fine art. There's so much being done out there that I think we're not paying attention to some of that substance as an art piece. And I tell everybody, as photographers, we stand on two legs. And no pun intended, so does everyone else. But photographically, we stand on two legs. One is that technical excellence, and the other is the aesthetics. And if you lift one of those legs up and you get out of balance, you're not truly producing fine art. Either the art's missing or that substance is missing. And I think a big part of it, too, for me, Nigel, to be honest with you, is that as a true black and white fine art photographer, I need to be a print artist. I mean, I need to understand my work is not complete until it's in print form. And everything I do is for that print that hangs on the home and is passed down from generation to generation. And therein lies a skill set. Being a print artist, mastering the process of the print, there lies a skill set that many don't even know exists. And yet it's as much my art as the capture is. And so to be a fine art, I've got to produce a piece. There has to be a physical, tangible piece for me to fulfill a Walden Fine Art black and white.
You know, Ansel Adams, of course, is one of the first photographers to really put forward that idea, about the fact that you can capture the image in the camera and on the film and or the plate as it was in his day. But for him, the image was never fully realized or complete until he had spent oftentimes many hours and many attempts at producing a print from an image and until he was satisfied with the end result and it complied with his own internal vision of what it was that he was trying to bring out of the photograph. Does that sound close to what you're saying here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a quote that I'm going to ad lib. I'm sure I'm going to misquote it, but I think it was Ansel Adams that said the negative was the score, but the print was the performance.
Yes.
And that's the way I feel. To me, it all culminates when it's a physical, tangible print that I'm handing to somebody as an heirloom for their family and their children's children beyond.
And the determination of whether or not a particular piece is, and I'm using air quotes here, art, is very difficult to pin down, I find. You can take your work to different galleries and have gallery owners look at it, and one will say, oh, yeah, that's beautiful. Another one will say, well, that's so cliched and it's just not art, is it really? I've experienced all ends of that spectrum.
Yes.
But one of the things that I notice a lot with photographers who try to break into the fine art photography field. Now, I'm not talking specifically here about fine art portraiture, but fine art landscapes or that kind of thing. And they'll go out and they'll take a few photographs of some flowers or maybe a landscape or something like that. And then they try and sell it online as fine art. But really, in a lot of times, it's almost as if they're relying on the subject itself to define the fact that it's art. So, for example, they may have traveled to some exotic location that was difficult for them to get to. And because of that, they feel it somehow elevates the image up to fine art status simply because of what it is or where it is. What are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
Well, you're exactly right. And fine art kind of carries that same feel sometimes as professional does in our industry. We were just talking about is, it's just an overused word. I feel like the key word for me is the word potential. And I constantly ask myself, because I can be in the same environment that you're in and a dozen other people that bought their first camera. But my question to myself is, am I functioning at potential? And I believe with the experience that I have in photography, if I'm functioning at potential, then my art is reaching a level of artistry that I can be proud of. But you're right. Sometimes because you're in the right place with the right camera, when you don't put those other elements together, you don't realize the potential you're not reaching because it is a pretty scene. It makes a pretty postcard. It looks good on your screensaver. It's nice to look at. But are you at potential? And I think the answer would have to be no to somebody who maybe hasn't rolled up their sleeves like we were talking earlier and set the course to learn and not to be good, but to be great. And I'll tell you this, Nigel, and I've said it for years, and as I educate and teach people, I'll tell them this. The difference between good and great photographers is not big things. It's not the big things. It's the little ones. You can learn certain substantive type of skill sets, exposure and processing files. But great photographers find ways to do little things no one else does that might even seem simplistic or unimportant to the average person, but they accumulate those little things in such a beautiful, finite way that their work takes on a depth, a drama, an impact no one else does. And it's not because they understand exposure and you don't. It's not because they understand processing a file and you don't. It's because they're paying attention to finite things to reach their potential, and they're constantly driving themselves that way. Now, that's an artist. It's a love-hate situation, Nigel, because, there's sleepless nights. I've done something and thought, oh, my God, somebody else look at it and go, I love it. And I could beat myself up because I'm like, you missed this, you missed that. You know better than that. It's something that's kind of, it's wonderful because it drives you, and it's terrible because you never satisfy that monster. But I think to be great, you're going to have to start getting beyond learning the big things and then begin to apply little ones no one else does that makes it your own.
That is such a fantastic interpretation of that and such a wonderful observation. It really encapsulates ideas that I felt were floating out there in the past just beyond my comprehension. And you've really cemented that. That is fantastic.
Thank you.
And I might add to that the great photographers, they know all the tools, they know the techniques, they know the composition, the lighting, and all that kind of thing. As you say, it's in the little things. But I think it also comes down to the fact that they know not just how, but when to apply these little things to their images. And it's done intelligently and with purpose. It isn't just a random Photoshop action that they decided to just run on the image and, hey, oh, look now, it's all cool and it's got a yellow tint and all this kind of thing.
You're exactly right. I could not agree with you more. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, kind of saying. And so there's times we have to back down, maintain our skills, and apply them appropriately.
So you're well known for your signature style and often emulated black and white fine art portraits. Let's talk about those for a little bit. And it's often been referred to as relationship portraiture. What was it that drew you to that particular style?
Honestly, all those years of learning under my father, I was a passion for the beautiful black and white artistry that he did. And you got to remember, we're going back a few decades now. When I was learning this, there was no digital. And when you shot black and white, you really loaded the camera with black and white. It was like intentional. And so, that's kind of where we got started. And then the business of photography, my father retired and I took over the business. I was struggling financially. We were really hurting. And I think the reason was I'd bowed my knee to my art. I'd let my art form go for the sake of doing what I thought everybody wanted, which was trying to be all things to all people, Nigel. And we were in the world of color photography, and this was back many, many years. And I'd left the black and white just for my personal stuff. And one day, realizing we were on a fast course downhill and we weren't going to make it, I said to myself and to my wife, I said, this is not the way I want to remember photography. I don't want to go out of business and remember doing all this stuff that's not why I got in the business. I said, I'm going to introduce a fine art line. That's where my passion is. I want to be in the dark room. I want to create beautiful, meaningful pieces. I don't want to just photograph what anybody wants. I want to do something with meaning from the heart, and I want it to be with substance, and I want it to be art that lasts. And so I introduced the relationship portraits, and I put a heavy price tag on them, and I put them in the middle of a studio that was full of anything you wanted. And I isolated that as my little art form. And I held on, Nigel, and 3 years later, my accountant said a word to me I'd never heard in my entire life. He said, "You're making a profit." I said, what does that mean? And what? I mean, I'd never heard him use that word before in a positive way. And I'm like, seriously? And we had built this little isolated, this little fine art, well-recognized style. And we didn't do it, with just great business. I think it was a miracle. But it all of a sudden, people started saying, that's what I want. And I never compromised it. And I kept it pure. And I kept it at a great price point where it was truly art. And all of a sudden, out of the center of a very struggling business, rose up an art form that drew people in and turned our business around. And I've stayed true to that. And I learned a lot. And I didn't learn it because I was so smart and I went to business school and no, I learned it out of desperation. To this day, those lessons and that person who started that is who we are today.
I think there's a couple of really valuable lessons in what you just said there that I think bear reiterating. One is that you went back to business basics. You were having a hard time, and so what you did was you stripped everything back to the core values of your relationship with photography.
Yes.
And you stay true to yourself, and you allowed that to feed off your passion and vice versa. The other thing is that I think there's a tendency for people when they look at great folks like yourself and other successful photographers, there's this tendency to imagine that, well, hey, these folks were successful from day one. They just picked up a camera, started photographing, and the next thing you know, they're super successful. They're doing great. They've never had a rough rock in the road anywhere. And I don't. Well, I know that couldn't be further from the truth, really. So I think it's important for people to realize that you weren't an overnight success. You've had the same difficulties and struggles in the early days of your business, just like everybody else has, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I tell you, it's in defining a style that's truly you and honing it down where people can recognize it, that your success lies. I just spoke at a school in Philadelphia, and I told, it was 100 or 200 students there. And I said, I'm going to say something to you that sounds really wrong, but I hope that someday you'll understand how true it is. And that is, you need to be less concerned that people like what you do and more concerned that they know what you do. Because when you define a style that's you will drive the people that don't want it away from you, but you will drive a group of people that love it and see it and know they can't get it anywhere else. And they'll drive as far as they have to drive, and they'll pay what they have to pay because they can only get that from one artist. And when you're at that level, which is really kind of what happened over that time, then you're going to experience the fact that we can't please all people at all time, and we can't function creatively and at our potential, there's that word again, when we try to do everything. So I do what I do, true to myself, as you say. It's recognizable, and I imagine there's a lot of people out there that say, I wouldn't go over there and pay that for that. That's fine, because that's what art is. But the people that love it, they drive for hours and they write the checks for it because they can't have it anywhere else, because it's such a part of me, defined so tightly. And I think wisdom today, Nigel, wisdom in this industry is in knowing what not to do, maybe more than what to do, because there's too many things at our fingertips. And artistry lies in focusing on the things that you're excellent at and then beginning to perfect those. And I think that's where creativity and artistry and technical excellence flourish.
I agree. And I think, this is kind of off at a tangent a little bit, but one of the things that I hear a lot is photographers will tell me when I ask them, well, what is it that you do? And they'll say, oh, I do portraits, I do pets and weddings and stuff like that. Well, what do you like the most? Well, I don't really like the weddings, but I do them anyway, because that's where the people tell me the money is, or where I can see the money is. And I feel that is such a disservice, not just to themselves, but also to potential brides and grooms. It's their wedding day. I mean, who wants to have somebody there who doesn't really want to be there? And that comes back again to that passion and staying true to who you are as an artist and what it is that you do, but not just that, but why you do it.
Yes.
And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. And talking about specialization, we've already mentioned this a little bit already, but how important would you say it is for professional photographers to specialize in a specific niche market almost from the beginning? And what does that word niche really mean anyway?
Well, it's critical. And when we have a program that we teach, and I'll tell people, I'll say, I can give you 2 words, and these 2 words are how you'll be successful in the market today. I'll guarantee it, but they're not easy to do. And that is create gaps. Create gaps between you and everyone else. And those have to be broad gaps that are recognizable to the public, broad gaps that segregate and separate you from the masses. And too often, what we do is we look at those that have picked up a camera and are out shooting, and maybe we feel they've reached a level of success. So we try to do what they're doing to say, oh, look, I can do that too. That is a disastrous decision. What you do is you turn and run the other way, and you say, I'm going to take artistry to a level that there's not many that can do that. To me, that's what niche marketing or niche marketing is defining, honing, staying true, and then allowing yourself to perfect. Remember, I said it's the little things that separate good and great photographers. Well, you can't get to the little things if you're doing everything. So you do those things that are recognizable, passionate about, and then you have to do this very hard thing, Nigel. You have to stay with it, message it, and give it time. People think, we're so used to pulling through ordering combo number 3, through a fast food restaurant that we don't understand that we're selling ourselves as artists. There's a saturation and a consistent time that we have to have. That's why your style or your niche or niche needs to be something you love and are passionate about, because when it does take off, when you do define it, are you going to be able to stay with it? Is your heart there? And so you need to love it.
In a sense, then, you're saying that you choose a niche market, make yourself sufficiently different to all the other photographers in the area to separate you and create this kind of unique you. And then that feeds into creating a brand for yourself. Now, you've worked really hard over the years to create an amazing and very well-recognized brand for Walden's photography in your community. What advice would you have for photographers about branding themselves?
Well, I think a lot of it is getting to know yourself in a way you're not used to. You spend time with yourself and those that care about you, and you find out where your passions are. Because I think there's flash in the pan things that I've done it myself, where you go to a conference and you see a colleague who's very talented doing something. You're like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And it's easy to get distracted. But I think one of the things I ask myself is, what can I do less of? In other words, in today, as I said a while ago, wisdom is in knowing what not to do. And I think for the average person, if you had to hone away some of the things you're doing, what would those things be? And then of the things that remain, how could you make those better? How can you diversify within a brand? And I'll give you a perfect example with our black and white. We offer fine art film sessions at a higher level price tag. This is amazing because what it does is it keeps us within our brand, but it offers a new pinnacle, a new point of connection, a new gap, but it stays true to who we are as photographers. So you'd be surprised at how you can get a little variety, and it could be in the product, it could be in the camera you shoot with film or digital, it could be any number of things, but not dilute or destroy your brand. And I think you have to spend time with yourself and make hard decisions in doing that.
On the subject of not diluting brands, your studio offers several other photographic specialties. Of course, there's Bev's great beau visage paintings, and
Yes.
you also do seniors and other stuff like that.
Mhm.
But the way that you go about it seems to be that you make a conscious decision to separate those as distinct brands, almost as if they're sub-brands of the Walden's Photography main brand. Whereas a lot of other photographers will just say, oh, well, now I offer baby portraits. Oh, and I do seniors, and I do kids, and I do weddings, and so on and so forth. But none of those have their own individual styling that's still consistent with the overall brand as a whole, but in and of themselves as a separate entity.
No, it is. You're right.
How do you go about separating these as distinct brands?
Very purposefully. We know that our trophy brand and the brand that still makes the money at Walden's is our Fine Art Black and White. But people live in different sized communities at times, and there has to be a reality. Plus, our passions, as much as mine is toward black and white, I love what Bev does with the beau visage, and I love doing a color study. But I don't want to mix it all together. So we segregate it in our studio. When you walk in, things aren't mixed together. There's a section that features our relationship work. There's a section that features the beau visage paintings and the color study. So like walking through a gallery, you can go in and see the different experiences that we offer. We don't mix them in a session. You can't do color and black and white in a Walden session. I mean, we don't just hit grayscale and it's like, okay, well, no, the styles are different and they're very unique. So if you're going to do a color study, we're going to design it differently. You're going to wear different clothing. We're going to light it differently. And because I think the greatest thing an artist can have is vision. And the other thing that is really different about us is when we have an exhibit or a partner or a display in our community, we don't mix all the work together. And like we have an exhibit now at one of our larger malls, and it's all black and white. And you might say, well, aren't you worried about people thinking, well, do you do this or do you do that? No, I'm not worried about that at all because I know that it's in our black and white that the emotion lies. That's our emotional brand. That's why we call it relationship work. That's what we're passionate about. And that will drive the people to our studio. And maybe second or third trip, they might do a color study or a beau visage, or they might walk in and say, oh my God, I didn't know you did this. This is what I want. But they understand what it is. They understand what the differences are. It's treated different. It's designed different. The products are different. The sales process is different. Everything is scripted for that experience. And for us, by having those segregated brands, it has worked beautifully. And it keeps us flourishing in our community. It keeps people coming back. But it doesn't cause me to try to still be all things to all people or try to do everything in a session. We've been able to stay the course, and I love what we do.
And even though Walden's photography is very well known in the community, I'm sure that doesn't mean that you can just sit back and stop marketing, assuming that everybody knows who you are, right? What are your favorite marketing strategies for attracting new clients? You mentioned one in passing just now, but let's see if we can kind of bundle those together.
Well, I tell everybody that you start with the golden R's, the two golden R's. That's return and referral. If you're not creating an experience along with your art that creates a buzz in the community, you're not doing it right. I think loyalty, honestly, has died. I tell everybody I was the pallbearer at Loyalty's funeral because I know loyalty's dead. But you know what's not dead is buzz. Buzz is that high level of excitement when you kind of shock people with just how amazing the experience is. Staging their trip, to the studio, the way you write notes, the way you treat them, everything as if they're the only client you have. That creates a level of buzz. And you talked about Apple before. I have no Apple stock. I wish I'd bought it ages ago. But I love Apple products, so I want people to buy them. I don't know why. It doesn't help me. It doesn't do anything for me. But I just love the experience, like when you go in their stores, the cool factor they have. And so they're creating that level of buzz, or some would call it culture. And I think we have to do that. So return and referral are critical. If you're not doing those right, don't go anywhere else. And then I think beyond that, we are a visual market, especially at the price tag we're at, Nigel. People need to see it and touch it and feel it. So we work with partners, high-end clothing stores, high-end children's, women's clothing stores, physicians, and we go in and we decorate their office. We work through their people to contact other people, interior decorators, people that can help me share the message and people can see and touch our work. We stay away from mass marketing at this level. If somebody says, oh, we reach 400,000 people, they've already told me I'm not interested. I'm looking for the handful of well-defined potential Walden clients. And auctions are a beautiful way to do that. We support a lot of good causes, and we go to auctions and we go big. We'll do a $5,000 gift certificate to get, say, in the live auction of fewer places than giving an 8 by 10 in a session where we are diluted out in the masses with the silent auction. So I could go on for hours about this, but because we teach a lot of marketing, but I'm giving it to you kind of in a nutshell.
Right. And the type of work that you do is definitely at the high end of the market and it's priced accordingly. But a lot of photographers have a difficult time charging what we might call appropriate fees for their work because they feel they're new to the business or they're trying to compete with other photographers out there. We already talked about how it's important for them to differentiate themselves. So that's one way that they could compete. But a lot of them compete on price. And assuming that they can create great work and despite being new to the business, what can they do to feel a bit more comfortable asking for fees that are more in line with a good quality product?
I don't think we compete on price. I think we compete on value. I tell everybody, I think you get the most value for your money here than anywhere else. And it's because I know the heart and soul and sweat that goes into it. So I think that's, important. But I think one thing I would tell people too is too many photographers out there don't respect their art. And let me ask you this: you're not doing the things to respect it, the way you show it to people, the way you handle it, the way you just the words you call it. We can do pics, or we don't even call them pictures. We're not allowed to use those words. It's images, it's art, it's portraiture. And again, this goes back to the difference between good and great or little things. So I think first, the question I would ask you as a photographer, not you, Nigel, but those listening, is are you respecting your art? And if you're not respecting it, then why in the world do you expect other people to? Do things like a certificate of authenticity. Maybe you handle it with a glove. Maybe you frame it and put it in such a way that you respect it. And if you're doing a good job, you need to then respect your art at the highest possible level. The other thing is, I think we can build product and simplify our price list. That hurts us an awful lot because when your price list looks like the Encyclopedia Britannica, you know what you've just done? You've taken away all of the emotion that they're going to experience when they see it, and you've kicked them into a left brain buying decision. Our price list is one page, and most of it's images. You could understand it in seconds. So the question I ask people about sales, and I would ask your listeners this question, because this has to do with money, is how much time in the sales room are you spending experiencing the art versus explaining the art? If you're explaining it 95% of the time, you've just diluted yourself and the value of what you're doing tremendously, and it becomes a square inch, price per inch decision. But if you're experiencing the art and the price list is very simple, it takes 5-10% of your time in there. Now you're going to see that respect to your art. You're going to see the emotion levels high. I mean, my goodness, I know you're probably sitting there going, is he ever going to shut up? I could go forever with this stuff. But that's such a broad question. I can't answer it, but I can tell you there's lots to it. And those are just a few of the things that come to mind.
You're right. Respect for the artwork really sets the foundation for the pricing. And I was talking to several photographers just in the last week. One of them, when I said, well, what do you do? Oh, well, this weekend I had such a great time because I went out and I shot a bunch of sick kids. Do you realize what that sounds like, when you said that? And another one says, well, I love to go out and shoot people's dogs.
Yeah.
The vocabulary that you use to talk about what you do, it conveys, even on an unconscious level, it's not always consciously picked up by the clients, but it creates these subconscious images and labels that people attach to what you're doing that can then become attached to the value of what you're doing, and that can bring the whole thing crashing down. And the other thing that you mentioned just now about the sales process, where if you're spending 95% of the time explaining the prices, essentially what you're doing there is sitting there trying to justify to the client why you're asking for what you're asking.
There's two things about imagery. I would ask people, talent having talent, and when you asked me the question originally, you said they might be, pretty good at what they do. But honestly, I think there's a difference between photographic talent and investment worthy art. And you need to ask yourself, is my art investment worthy? Is it that black dress that a woman will spend $700 on because it's always in style? And ask yourself two questions. Is my work investment worthy? And is it emotionally rich? And if it doesn't have those elements to it, you may be good at what you do, but is it really something I want to put over my sofa? Is it really something I want to look at every single day? How's it going to wear on me? What am I going to feel in 10 years with it? And I think there are traits that are investment worthy. We sell that because it's simple, it's rich, it's always in style. And then emotionally rich, meaning you've touched their heart. It's like something about that experience and that art touches them, and it has that thread of undertone of emotion. And if you can do those two things, that's going to help you an awful lot.
Absolutely. And from everything that I've seen about you and Bev, it's very clear that high quality, obviously, and a great customer experience are very important to the both of you. What are some of the systems that you have in place to ensure that those conform to your high standards?
Well, we're appointment only, which helps, because if I know, the old saying, if I knew you were coming, I baked a cake. Well, we want to know you're coming so we can bake a cake. Not really, but so that we can prepare. And so we have a written standard operating guide. This is for anybody and everybody on staff to follow. And we stage what we call staging the experience. When somebody's coming for a session, our staff, Bev and myself, and any others, when our staff will go up and down based on season and part-timers, but they know that 15 minutes before a client comes, we go to the dressing room and we stage it. I put an ice bucket with cold water labeled with our label on it. We have a note, handwritten note, and it's usually to the child. It's not to an adult. So that if there's a mom and a dad and two children, you write the note to the children. And that's setting out in the room. We have fragrance that we put out through a light bulb and a oil that we drop on a ring. So and the room is cleaned 15 minutes ahead of time. We have a coloring book that we had an illustrator do, and it's the Walden experience in a coloring book. So we put crayons in this coloring book about your entire Walden experience for young children. And it kind of wows people. They're like, oh, look, honey, they got you a coloring book. And then they realize it's us. We had an illustrator do it. And so they're like, wow. And it's grand. I like to call it 2x4 marketing. It hits you upside the head and you're like, where'd that come from? We stage everything with refreshments and treats. We have a delivery area where the images are well lit. So when you pick up, we have that area set up. We unveil your art. I mean, I could go on and on, but you're getting the point. It's about experience at the highest level. And the one thing you better never do is let somebody come in and spend a lot of money. And once they've spent that money, is to not treat them with the same fashion as before they did. Why is it that, oh, I've got your money, you're not important anymore? That person is the most important people in the world. And we do some things like random acts of kindness, where our staff knows if they find out at the mall, they're out shopping, that one of our customers has a young child maybe that broke their leg or they won a championship at a dance concert, buy them a gift and send it to them. And along with a note, just thinking about you, heard about this victory or heard about your struggle, just wanted to brighten your day. So we do random things like that. And all of this stuff builds up in the community to be that Walden culture buzz. And it works for us. It really works for us. But we love people too. So it's not like, oh my God, I hate doing this. We really love them. So it's fun.
These things are not hard to do for people. A photographer working by themselves in their own business, if they give themselves enough space in their business, it's easy to do these kinds of things and make the customers that you have feel like they're the most important people to you.
Do it consistently, because consistency is important. Because if you do it one time and not the next, you'll disappoint people. And then add to that as you can. And for us, we're not doing 30 sessions a week. We're only doing a very few. So that allows us now to, and that was all strategically planned, so that now we're doing fewer sessions at higher dollar amounts and treating those people like family. And it works. It'll build a cycle. You'll build a cycle of success doing it, but you do it one step at a time, one day at a time. But we have it written down. It's a plan. It's not haphazard, and that's critical. So there's a standard procedure underneath. And if you ever want to read a book, you probably read, it's called the E-Myth, and that really was our standard. Once we read the E-Myth, and now the E-Myth Revisited, that's been our standard for building that undercurrent of consistency.
Yeah, it's a great book. Michael Gerber did a really good job on that. You know, there have been so many amazing pieces of information and inspiration in our chat so far that if anybody out there is looking for the, again, air quotes, secrets to creating a successful business, they're right here. I mean, just go back and listen to this a dozen times if you have to, because they're all in here. One last thing, I was really excited to notice when I recently visited your website again that you've opened a new facility next door to your studio in Lexington that you've called The Summit. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what it is and what your vision for that is going to be?
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in it while we're talking. I'm over here in the Summit right now. It's a place of art, inspiration, and education. We wanted to build a gallery I've traveled the world as PPA president, as speakers with Kodak, different things like that, and been able to see some amazing places. And I thought, you know what, we're going to put a gallery up of some of that type of work, some of the fine art things that I've collected, and we're going to make this place a place of education, inspiration, and art. And so what we're doing is we're educating here. That I have a class coming up weekend after this, which will be here. We invite other speakers in. We teach the community, high school photography classes. They're all invited at no charge, and we do classes. And so it's a place that we can get a community involvement and show a different side to what we do. We have inspirational art that we tie with some of the things with some scripture that we do. We have art, different forms, and we have education. So we have a camera room. They can come in, they can sit down, and we can do some classes for beginners, for our customers who want to learn how to take better pictures. And I use the word pictures in that case, but just so you know, only in that case. We work through local camera stores to have classes, and all free of charge. And it helps create that buzz in the community, and it helps us to market. And then we have private classes that we charge for and invite people in. We've had painters in. We had Heather Michelle in, Heather the painter in, and she did a class here. And so it's all about art, inspiration, and education. And it's there to raise awareness of photography as art, and to serve as a marketing tool for us, and to let us share our passion beyond ways we've already done it.
It sounds like an amazing venture, and it's not all that terribly far from where I'm sitting here in Memphis, so I might take a little trip up there one of these days and come take a look at it.
Yeah, we'd love it.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. This has been truly wonderful. I can't begin to thank you enough for all of the information and knowledge and expertise that you've shared here. It's like we just literally plugged into your head and just downloaded everything.
It's been a pleasure, and second passion to doing photography is sharing what I know about it with people I care about, which are people in this industry. And I appreciate the opportunity to share, and hope that we get many more times. And we just love the people in this business because they're passionate people. It's not like a job. It's like who you are. And so we love being around them.
Absolutely. Well, we'd love to have you back again sometime.
I hope you do. We'd be excited to do it. Get Bev on here. She can do a little Bovacizer or sales stuff.
Yes.
I don't have to listen to this Southern boy talk. You can listen to somebody much better.
Well, Tim, thank you again. It's been wonderful, and I hope to have you back on again sometime, and we'll get Bev on here next time.
Sounds great, and thank you. Thanks, everybody.